B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, April 30th, 2019. And today is the day of the second attempt at regime change in Venezuela, as American toady Juan Guaido attempted to take over a military airfield near Caracas. And the most stunning thing about all of this is the lack of opposition in the United States to U.S.-backed regime change in Venezuela. It is stunning to me that voices in the media, elected officials, are largely silent. Going with the flow here, as Trump recruiting Elliott Abrams, empowering John Bolton, attempts a little regime change action in an oil-rich country in our own hemisphere. And what happened earlier today was clearly orchestrated. Juan Guaido appears to have some members of the military who have defected from loyalty to the Maduro government. And so they took up positions at this Generalissimo Francisco de Miranda Air Base, a military airport in Caracas known as La Carlota, or is it Carlota? And Guaido claimed that the definitive end of the usurpation starts today. And he uses American-style propaganda methods, projecting onto the other side the defects of his own position. He is the usurper. He and his wealthy backers sat out last May's nationwide election in Venezuela. They boycotted it. And then they declared that it was not legitimate when, despite having 3 challengers, Maduro claimed some 60+% of the vote. International observers said that it was a clean election. But our media routinely plays back a history that was never reported in real time, claiming that there's widespread. Here's the explainer in the New York Times. Maduro, who's been in office since 2013, won re-election last year in a contest that was widely seen as fraudulent. And I have yet to see the New York Times flesh out that claim. Why is it fraudulent? Why is that so widely seen that we don't need any evidence to sustain the claim? Turning now to the coverage of the Washington Post, the CIA's favorite outlet. Violent clashes erupted in Caracas, where thousands of protesters swarmed the streets. Forces loyal to Maduro responded with force. 7 people reported wounded, and in at least one instance, some sort of an armored personnel carrier apparently plunged into a crowd and may have mowed down at least one person. Maduro says the military has remained loyal. Government leaders have denounced this coup attempt by what they described as a reduced group of military officers and warned of a counterattack. So it's regime change on. And this is America at its worst. This is not even some sort of covert operation. You've got Mike Pence openly tweeting support for this government that has been recognized by the United States without any connection to the Constitution of Venezuela. The claim by Juan Guaido that he was the acting or interim president based on the Constitution expired 30 days after he claimed it. But the U.S. and some 40, 50 other governments recognize Guaido as the leader of Venezuela. This is so separated from reality that it is remarkable. And so Guaido, wrapping this in liberation, quoted as saying, "At this moment, I am with the main military units of our armed forces starting the final phase of Operation Liberty. People of Venezuela, we will go to the street with armed forces to continue taking the streets until we consolidate the end of usurpation." And so this language I find fascinating. The rationales that are being offered are irrational. And so many people just say, okay, Maduro's a bad guy. He's presided over a once rich nation that's now impoverished. Few people look at the impact of American sanctions, the cost to Venezuela of 5 years of rock-bottom oil prices. And very few people look at the direct impact of American sanctions. There's a new study that was released yesterday by respected economists Mark Weisbrot and Jeffrey Sachs. Sachs is the top professor at Columbia University, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him about 10 years ago. And they clearly state that 40,000 people have died as a result of American sanctions that are deliberately aiming to wreck Venezuela's economy and lead to regime change. And of course, when you put a country on its knees, you can impose austerity economics and, of course, the shock doctrine, as Naomi Klein has described it so well. This form of disaster capitalism enables the U.S. to bust the unions in Venezuela, allow for foreign investment into the oil patch. And John Bolton's been clear. It's the oil that motivates us here, not some claim to have a humanitarian concern for the people of Venezuela. And, of course, the sanctions started in 2015 under an executive order signed by Barack Obama. And Weisbrot and Sachs argue that the loss in foreign exchange has shocked the economy and pushed Venezuela into hyperinflation starting in late 2017, and then Trump added more sanctions. And based on a number of different studies, the report estimates that sanctions are responsible for 40,000 deaths in 2017 and 2018. There are a further 300,000 people at risk due to lack of access to medicines right now. So this is how America operates. And while Trump and his team are more brazen, Uncle Sam, the Yankee, we've been doing this for decades. Oh, and here's a war profiteer coming along. You know Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater. It's now called Academy. He also runs a mercenary company called Frontier Services Group. And he's been wandering around Washington peddling a plan to privatize the U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. And privatizing it would also, not put American troops front and center for this occupation. That probably has some political appeal. The plan is to hire 5,000 mercenary soldiers, mostly from Central and South America, and deploy them in Venezuela. And maybe the plan is moving forward with or without Eric Prince. Obviously, if he got approval for it, we probably wouldn't know at this point. Over at the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff has a plan for Eric Prince. He believes that Prince committed perjury before the committee in describing the meeting that we know took place 9 days before Trump took office out in the Seychelles Islands, where Eric Prince met with a Russian financier alleged to be close to Vladimir Putin. And Schiff says, from what we know now from the Mueller report, that was not a chance meeting, as Prince had testified. And Schiff says, in very material ways, I think the evidence strongly suggests he willingly misled our committee, and the Justice Department needs to consider whether there's a prosecutable case. Now, do you really think that the Bill Barr Republican Justice Department is going to prosecute Eric Prince for perjury? I don't. Here in California, we're still reeling from the shooting at the synagogue in Poway near San Diego on Saturday. And yesterday I reported how the FBI got a tip and didn't have enough time to get there in order to prevent the carnage that occurred. And I don't fault the FBI for that. I was clear about that yesterday. And I want to be equally clear that the story I'm about to relate occurred about 12 hours before the shooting at the synagogue in Poway. And this is another one of those questionable cases of alleged domestic terrorism attempted. This one involves Mark Domingo, an Army veteran, age 26, from the Los Angeles area. And starting in March, he made comments online that drew the attention of the FBI. And they did what they always do. They assigned a paid informant to cozy up to Domingo. And this is a guy who served in Afghanistan, later converted to Islam, expressed his support in online posts for violent jihad, a desire to seek retribution for attacks against Muslims, and a willingness to become a martyr. Now, Domingo, according to news accounts, talked with his handler, his FBI informant, and they cooked up a scheme to bomb a site in Long Beach where a white supremacist group, the United Patriot National Front, was scheduled to have a public rally. And like so many other cases, Domingo did not have the capability to create the bomb that he confided in his informant that he was planning to detonate. And so the FBI provided it for him. And as he went to the location, this park in Long Beach, to apparently install this improvised explosive device, they arrested him. And then they went to the media and said, "Look, we have just prevented another domestic terrorism attack." There's a pattern here. And, as you know, I consider the FBI to be a rogue agency in far too many cases. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Patrick Rainsberger, he just renewed his annual subscription, and people who kick in $5 or $10 a month, like Alice Carlson, Susan Lewis, and John Morgan. I appreciate your support here, and I want to invite others to participate. All you have to do is come to peterbcollins.com, find the menu tab, click on Become a Subscriber. When you land on the sign-up page, you get to choose $5, $10, $20 a month. Our $50 annual subscription comes with the bonus book inducement, and our $55 book right now is 2100, A Dystopian Utopia. I'd love to share a copy of that with you. Just take out a new subscription and give me a mailing address in the continental U.S., and I will get it shipped off to you pronto. No surprise when the stories I'm about to tell you cross your ears. The impact of the Trump corporate tax cuts of 2017 showed up in 2018. And, for example, Amazon earned over $10 billion in profit and paid zero taxes. In fact, they got rebates for, I don't know why. The second most profitable American company last year was Delta Airlines, earning $5 billion, paying zero taxes. Chevron earned somewhere north of $4 billion, zero taxes. General Motors, around $4 billion, zero taxes. You get the idea. And down at the bottom, Salesforce, and I don't have a number for their gross profit, but it was somewhere around $1 billion or $1.5 billion based on the graph that I'm looking at. And they're at the bottom of the chart. They paid zero tax but got no rebates. Then we look at the other side of the trickle-down plan. Trump promised that the average American would see his or her wages increase by $4,000 a year because of his tax cut package. The actual figure, $6.21 a week, or a total of $233 a year. And it brings me to my latest podcast released today at whowhatwhy.org. And it's about working at Walmart. Hugo Mounier is a French-Canadian journalist who specializes in what he calls immersion reporting. So he went essentially undercover. He went to work at a Walmart store and he lasted 90 days. He talked about the humiliation that he faced from the shoppers who treat the associates like dirt. He talks about being required to watch boring training videos, attend morning meetings where they have to end with a ritual Walmart cheer, and how they dangle a measly $2,000 annual bonus over people in an effort to motivate them and get them to show up for work and follow the rules. Here's an excerpt from my interview with Hugo Munier.
That's correct. If there's a freezer broke, you have to call Bentonville. So it's the first time. Before I heard about Bentonville in Arkansas all stuff, the first time they were mentioned that name is because there was a freezer was broke, and they said, okay, we will need to call Bentonville on that. And Bentonville already knew it, and they will manage it by this 10th.
That's Hugo Munier. His book, Walmart, A Diary of an Associate, has just been released in English here in the U.S. of A. Not a surprise, but Rod Rosenstein has submitted his resignation at the Justice Department, where he's been the Deputy Attorney General. And he soiled himself in so many different ways. Now, he gets credit from a lot of people for being the guy who decided that we needed the Mueller investigation and hired Bob Mueller as a special counsel. But Rod Rosenstein is also the guy who wrote the phony letter that was used to fire FBI Director James Comey on the pretext of his bad handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation in 2016. But that doesn't stop Rosenstein from sending air kisses to Trump on his way out the door. As I submit my resignation, effective May 11, I am grateful to you for the opportunity to serve, for the courtesy and humor you often display in our personal conversations, and for the goals you set in your inaugural address: patriotism, unity, safety, education, and prosperity, because a nation exists to serve its citizens. Oh, Rod, you find such glory in service to Trump. You're a schlub. That's really clear. Vladimir Putin has made some comments about the United States conviction and sentencing of Russian citizen Maria Butina. He called it an outrage. And as you have heard on this program, the public stories, the media coverage of Maria Butina have painted her as an agent of the Kremlin, like she was a KGB or a GRU agent. And James Bamford, the Washington-based reporter, wrote a brilliant pushback, takedown of those claims that was published more than 2 months ago. But the corporate media worldwide really has not caught up, and they take at face value the language that she was an admitted agent. Now, she pled guilty to failing to register as an agent, but that doesn't mean that she was a covert operative for the state of Russia. And that is the implication that is widely and falsely promoted in the media. So Putin told reporters in Beijing, it's an outrage. It's not clear what she was convicted of or what crime she committed. I think it's a prime example of saving face. They arrested her and put the girl in jail, but there was nothing on her. So in order not to look totally stupid, they fixed her up with an 18-month sentence to show that she was guilty of something. And you know what? That is quite accurate. And what I find so amusing and enraging is how the Mueller report is being used by the media outlets that promoted Russiagate as proof of Russian interference in the 2016 election. And right now I'm looking at a story from Public Radio International. And they have a website where they post text articles of news and commentary. And this is different from NPR. I just want to make that clarification. But this report opens with this claim: American citizens are unwittingly becoming Russian agents. That's an unavoidable conclusion of Mueller's report on his investigation into the 2016 election, and an important problem that requires a change in thinking about how people interact on social media. And essentially, they are warning people that there is a Russian secret agent that could be lurking behind every Facebook post and underneath every tweet that you read. And so you must be vigilant at all moments that the Russians may be trying to manipulate your brain. This is so outlandish so ridiculously cartoonish and exaggerated? And think how many people trust Public Radio International and will swallow this hook, line, and sinker. Trump's latest initiative on immigration issues is to order the penniless asylum seekers who show up at our southern border to not only pay a fee to process their asylum claim, but they are being banned from doing any work while they're in the United States awaiting a trial on their asylum claim. And this just drives people further underground. And it is the kind of idiotic policies that Trump believes will send a message that we're getting tough, and therefore people should not even attempt to come to the United States and claim asylum. Now, this is unusual for Trump because he loves to issue orders that go into effect immediately. But this has a 90-day fuse on it, allowing regulations to be created that would carry out his orders. And Kevin McAleenan, who is the new acting head of Homeland Security, he is being given the assignment to flesh all this out. But the bottom line is that this is an irrational policy. And they want to try to fast-track the asylum hearings that are held, but we have a backlog of 800,000 cases. And Trump claims that we have tens of thousands of people piling up on both sides of our southern border, when we know that there are some facilities that are nearly vacant, either those that are simply housing or those that are lockups for the individuals who have crossed our border. So this is just another effort to pander to the Republican base that hates immigrants and that believes that we can seal off the southern border and it'll make America great again. It is quite ridiculous. And speaking of asylum, the man who claimed and was granted asylum at the Embassy of Ecuador for nearly 7 years, Julian Assange, well, we are learning from the Ecuadorian consul who was in charge of the consulate there for 6 of the 7 years that Assange was present. His name is Fidel Narvaez. And he is pushing back and saying that it's a smokescreen, that Assange had violated his asylum conditions. He said there were a couple of isolated incidents with security guards, but no improper conduct, and that the claims that Assange smeared his feces on the embassy wall, not true. The only footage to emerge from his stay is a leaked surveillance video of Julian Assange trying to ride a skateboard in a small room inside the embassy. And Lenin Moreno, the president who canceled his asylum, appears to have lied and fabricated things to provide a rationale for his shift in the asylum granted to Julian Assange. Interesting sequence of events here. First of all, I am pleased to see that Carol Rosenberg, who has provided the most dedicated coverage of Guantanamo Bay and the prison facility there, while she worked for the Miami Herald, she now appears to be on staff at the New York Times. I see her byline there. And she had 2 stories recently. One on Sunday, where she reported that the aging population of the 40 prisoners at Guantanamo Bay requires us to develop facilities for elderly people. And there is a plan to keep the prison open for another 25 years when people like Abu Zubaydah will be 72 years old. And other people, the oldest would be 96 in 25 years. And so the commandant there, who was serving a 1-year tour, Rear Admiral John C. Ring, he made several proposals to upgrade the facilities there to deal with an aging population. And we don't know if that's related, but the very next day, the commander was sacked 7 weeks before he was to complete his tour and move on to another assignment. This is highly unusual. We're only told that there was a month-long investigation that was opened in March. We don't know if this is linked to his proposals to upgrade the facilities, but it's just another mystery continuing at the American Gulag on the tip of the island of Cuba. You may know that the Democrats set up new rules for this primary because of the large number of candidates running for president next year. The first debates are scheduled to occur at the end of June 26th and 27th, and they will divide the number of candidates who qualify between those two debate outings. Now, the new requirements are that in order to be invited to a debate, you have to receive 65,000 donations from different people who are in 20 or more states, or you have to register 1% support in 3 national polls. So, the criteria do tend to filter out some candidates, but the New York Times did a quick rundown. Bernie Sanders meets both qualifications, as does Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden. Amy Klobuchar shows up in the polls but doesn't have 65,000 donors. So does Beto O'Rourke. And let's take a look here. Andrew Yang meets both criteria. Cory Booker, we don't know about his contributions, but he does meet the polling requirement, as does Julian Castro, who is just about 9,000 donors shy of the benchmark there. Kirsten Gillibrand is under 65,000 but shows up in 6 polls. John Hickenlooper will be invited, not based on contributions but based on polling. 4 polls show him with 1% or more. Same with John Delaney. Jay Inslee meets the polling criteria but is still working toward the 65,000 number. Same for Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan. Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii shows in 2 polls and is under 65,000 donors, despite my $1 contribution to her campaign. And the people who appear to meet neither criteria are Eric Swalwell, Wayne Messam, Marianne Williamson, and Seth Moulton. And finally today, I want to recommend a piece that appeared at The Nation magazine's website last week under the byline of Peter Dow, spelled D-A-O-U. And Dow was the digital director for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. And he was very aggressive about it with some pretty sharp elbows at the time. The headline reads, "I was Bernie's biggest critic in 2016. I've changed my mind." And he goes on to advise the Democrats not to try to squelch the Sanders campaign. "I am concerned that festering anger from 2016 is causing a rift in the electorate that Trump and the Republicans can and will exploit. This is Dow continuing. Sanders is unquestionably in the top tier of candidates for the Democratic nomination, and it would be an epic act of self-destruction for Democrats to plunge into another internecine conflict over his candidacy at a time when they need to marshal every asset to defeat Trump and his GOP cronies. I am calling on Democrats, progressives, and leftists who hit the pause button to table our disagreements as we fight to preserve the rule of law and the last semblance of our democracy." So it's a pretty interesting confessional, and I encourage you to read it, particularly if you're one of those people who keeps bashing Bernie over ancient history from 2016. It really is time to move on, and I hope people get the message. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast today. You're free to share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube, and I'm still Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.